Hi guys, this is the fourth part of the how to build a chatbot using Angular, Node.js, and Dialogflow series. In this video, I'm going to be covering how to set up the front end, which is the Angular application for this project. I'll be coding the TypeScript files while explaining the template and style sheets for you. So if you want to view this full source code, just find the link in the source code for the source code in the video description below. And you can visit my accompanying blog post for this application, which is also linked in the video description, which contains parts of the source code. So let's get started. First thing we need to do, if you don't already have an Angular project, is we have to set up a new Angular project. And the way we do that is by running the command ng new. And for this application, let's call it Angular Chatbot. So since I've already have it created, I'm not going to follow through with this command, but you can run it anyways. Um, Actually, let's run it and see. So I want to guide you through the prompt that's displayed. So when you first set up an Angular project, it'll ask, would you like to add routing? Say yes. And for style sheets, you select CSS, um, CSS, and just click enter. And that should create the Angular project for you. Once you have the project created, just cd into this project, open it up in your coding workspace, and then we have to generate two components. And the way we do that is by saying ng generate component, and these two components are the chat component. So generate this component and the ng generate component message. So the message components. So the chat and message components will be generated as you see here. And what these two components do is generate, so the chat component will hold the chat window itself, while the message component will be used for each message in the chat window. We also need to create a service for this application. So it's called a chat service, and the way you do that is by running this command. So ng generate chat, and it automatically generates the chat service. Just make sure to cd into your chat uh, folder first. So right here, just go to app. Okay, so go here and then cd into chat, and then run ng generate service chat, and that will create this file. So this file will be needed for passing HTTP requests to the server. So now that we're done that, we need to define the models for this application. And how we do that is by creating a models folder. So just click on create folder here and create 3 files inside this folder. And these models will be used extensively in our application. So let's code them out now. So all you have to do is say export class message, and let me see. Yeah, so text, and we use the optional parameter here. So it could or could not be present. The date is mandatory, and the user owner is a Boolean, indicating that whether it's from the end user or not. If it's not from the end user, then it's from the chatbot. Next, we go to the response message modal, and over here, same thing. So response message, optional string, original query, So what the response message is the response that the Dialogflow chatbot has issued. The original query is the query sent to the Dialogflow API by the end user, and the intent is the grouping of the response message and query, basically to make the responses and requests more organized. Dialogflow groups it into things called intents. So moving on to the text message class, and what we do is we use first name, and this class will be used by the end user. So this will contain the end user's first name and the text query. So now that we're done that, let's not forget to code the environments file. So create a new file in source app directory, call it environments, and inside it define a environments.ts file, and add the following values. So I'll go through what each of these means. So we call production is false, so we're in development environment. You can add your first name here. This is my first name, but you can change it out to yours. And then Dialogflow project ID. So this project ID is found in your Dialogflow console, and this is basically the Google Cloud Platform project ID for your Dialogflow project. So just make sure to get that from the Google Cloud Platform dashboard. If you're not sure how to do that, just see my previous videos. Part two goes over how to get this value. And then we have the backend. So this is the base URL. Backend's running on port 3000 locally. And the request text URL, which is the URL that sends and receives user queries to the backend, is hosted here. So that will be referenced extensively throughout this application. So now that we're done that, let's make sure to go to our app module file and make sure you have the declaration set to be app component, chat component, message component. And then in the providers list, make sure you add chat service. This is done so that Angular is aware of these components and that the application is using these components and services. So once you're done that, we can turn our attention to the chat component. So let's go there. Yeah, so the chat component, let's start by adding code to the TypeScript file. Black, black enable. Now we're going to define some input tags. This input directive is used to get messages from the app component, which renders this chat component. Okay, so now we're just defining some input directives, and all this data is passed from the uh, app component, which is the parent component, to the chat component, which is the child. Okay. Feel free to fast forward if you find this tedious. You can just get this source code at my blog post linked in the description below. Okay, so now that we're done that, we also need the text input. So this text input string will contain the actual user query entered by the end user into the text chat input field. Then we call it constructor, which is already defined. And then we inject it with the chat service. So we're using dependency injection to use the chat service. Then nothing goes in ng on init, but we are making a send message method. And what this, the primary function of the send message method is to uh, send messages to the backend. And those messages are going to contain the user query um, typed into the chat window input field. So as you see here, this takes in text input, and then date is, for now, we give it a blank value. And then user owner is set to true, so indicating that this indeed is from the end user. We push this to the messages array. New message. Then we say let message back, text message, first name. So we're using the text message model to get the first name, pass it in, and get the text, which is held in text input. Then we say if vac enabled. So this is just a confirmation that everything's working as we expect. We have chat service, send message, and we're going to send the message back variable. Then we're going to, so this is a HTTP call to the chat service. That chat service is going to return a observable. So we have to subscribe to this observable in order to receive it, because as you know, observables are asynchronous, so they have to be subscribed in order to see their results, or you run into some weird asynchronous behavior. So there's no need to console log this. And then the returning message is given the type message, and we're taking the response message, the date, which is a new date, which is the current date, to date string, and we're setting user owner to false because this message is from Dialogflow. Okay, so let's import this. Okay, so now we say this dot messages dot push. We push in this message to the messages array, and we're good. Okay. Okay, so now that we're done that, we can clear the text input field by assigning it a blank value so that the next message can be inputted fine. Then we're going to define a event listener function. And what this is it looks for the when the enter key is pressed, and if it is, then call the send message method. So on the front end, there's an event listener notifying if the enter key is pressed, which is represented by key code 13, then call the send message method in order to simulate a sending of the message in typical chat applications. Okay, so now let's build the template file. So this one's already built for us. So again, if you want this, just visit my blog post or visit the source code on my GitHub account. which is linked in the video description. And so let's go through this one more time. So messages, which is the messages array, contains a message. So that message is appended or displayed into the main window using the message component. This message is passed in the message text, the date, and all the color values passed in from the app component. We'll cover this later, so don't concern yourself about it too much. And we're also using the ng class directive conditionally in order to either add the left message or the right message classes. As the class names imply, the left message class will position any message containing it to the left side of the chat window, and that'll indicate that it was sent from Dialogflow, and any message containing the right message class will be positioned to the right side of the chat window, indicating that it was sent from the end user. Okay, so now we go on to the text area. So again, it's a typical text area, and we see a two-way binding here between the component and the view parts of the chat component for the text input. So two-way binding is when data can pass from the component to the view and then from view to the component back again, so bidirectional. And we also see a key up event listener, which fires the on key method that we just coded before, basically looking for the enter key, whether the enter key was pressed so that it can call the send message method. And then we have the click listener, send a message encapsulated in the I tag. So this button you see here, this is the button right there, and it'll call the send message as usual. And so yeah, so that's the chat template file. Now we need to add some CSS styles for this chat component. Again, this is a bit lengthy, so you can get this code from the source code linked in the video description. I'll just go through it quickly. So you have display flex, specify a height. So left message, go to the left. Um, right message, go to the right. You have text input message assigned a color of light blue, and the input icon is assigned a color of blue. So there's almost Twitter-like color theme for this application. So now that we're covered that, so let's move on to the chat service class. So in the service class, the predominant purpose of this service class is to issue HTTP requests to the backend and receive them. So let's code that out here. So first we have to start out by defining some HTTP headers using the HTTP header options variable. We'll call HTTP headers. Let's say access, control, allow, origin, and then give it the value of all. So this is done in order to bypass the CORS policy um, enforced by most modern browsers. Basically, CORS policy states that you cannot make requests to foreign URLs unless you have, this header defined, uh, and that's done for security reasons. But for the purposes of this application, since it's a development environment, we can easily override it by including the header above. So now we're defining the request body. So we have the project ID, the environment file, and we're referencing the project ID value referenced in the stated in the environment file. Then we have the request text, and we get the text message.text from that. So it's building the project ID, which is required for authentication by Dialogflow, and then the actual user query itself. And then this is all passed in an HTTP post request to the backend. So in order to reference the backend URL, we use environment variables and defined in the environment.ts file. And this is always a great idea because in case the environment's variables or URLs change in the future, they can easily be changed by just changing the value of this one variable in the environment.ts file. So it's very low code duplication, which is a very important software design pattern or principle. So now that we're done, we're returning this observable to the chat component, and the chat component will eventually subscribe to it. So now that we're done the chat component, we can turn our attention to the message component. In the message component, let's code out the uh, TypeScript file. So this is basically just a bunch of inputs. Input directives. Message component is not it's basically a view component. What I mean by that is it just takes in data and just displays them. It doesn't, make HTTP requests or any complicated logic like that. So we have text date owner, all passed in from the chat component, as you saw in the chat component's template file. Then you have input power back. Okay, so we can just speed things up here. So this will also be passed in here. And we basically just need a constructor and a ng on init void. Okay, that left. Okay, so now it takes in the data passed to it from the parent component, which is the chat component. The child component is the message component, taking in all these values and then displaying them. And so now let's code the message component's template file. So over here you can see the ng style directive. Um, the colors passed in from the chat component are now used in the ng class directive and ng style directive, sorry, to render the colors as background colors and the actual color. And then also note the use of the owner variable used to differentiate between the end user's messages and Dialogflow chatbot's messages. So this is the end user's message, and since it's not an owner, it's the chatbot's message. Okay, so then this contains the text. So now that we're done that, we just have to code the message components CSS file, and that's done by adding the following styles. So setting a width of 80%, text align to the right, and then inline block and some padding to just make everything look nicer. And yeah, so we're pasting in the message using interpolation here. Sorry, it's not interpolation. It's you printing the message of the text variable here. And then we are moving on. So now that we're done with the message component, we can move on to the app component. And we're going to set up this default component. Basically, the app component is set up by default by every Angular application, and we just need to add some logic here. So let me pull it up right now. Okay, so what it is, it's the app component is merely passing data from it to the chat component, and then from the chat component to the actual message component. So we just have to input some color values here. string 343. Okay, so now we're just defining some colors. Yeah, okay. So now we have a messages array defined here. So now we can code the app components template file, which has already been done. So now what it's doing is it's passing this data to the app, its child component, which is chat component, and then from the chat component, that data goes to the message component. So it's a kind of waterfall of data flow. Uh, so now, as a last step, we have to add the chat container uh, CSS styles, just some CSS styles to define the position and dimensions of the chat container, which you see here. Okay, so now that we're done building the app components along with all the other components, which is chat and message, we can make sure the front-end application builds without any errors using the following commands. So let's run npm start and see what happens. Actually, yeah, I should probably cd into the root directory. So as a general guideline, you shouldn't run the npm commands from a component directory. It's best to run them in the root directory of the Angular application. Give it a couple of seconds here. Again, so right now it's bundling everything, building all the application requirements and all these files, and all those files in a production environment will be contained in the public folder. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so this is imported twice. Okay, so we just have some debugging to do here. Message. Actually, this is not even required. And there we go. So as you saw there, it's actually not required to use the messages array in the app component, as it's not doing anything besides just passing color values and a title to its child components. So we can just take off message because the messages array is actually being modified or added to in the chat component. So that was a bit of redundancy. So once we're done that, we can successfully see the application has compiled successfully. So now we can go over to the localhost application, and here we are. So since we haven't started the backend yet, it's not going to display Dialogflow messages. So that's going to be what the next and final part of the video is about. So now that we've successfully set up the front end, we'll end the video here. So that's it for part 4. In the next and final part of this video series, we'll go over the running of the application from the setting up of the backend application and Dialogflow to posting chat messages and receiving them from the front end. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or criticisms, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.